What can we learn from Utah's victory over the Weber State Wildcats as it pertains to Utah's season as they're set to begin Pac-12 play? We're talking about it on today's Locked On Utes.
You are Locked On Utes, your daily podcast on the Utah Utes. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Hello, everyone, and thank you for making Locked On Utes your first listen every single day. We are available on all platforms, including YouTube and wherever you may get your podcast. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel Sportsbook, the official sportsbook of Locked On. You can make every moment more right now because new customers can bet $5 and get $200 in bonus bets, guaranteed. Visit FanDuel.com/LockedOn to get started. My name is JT Wistcill, former intern inside the University of Utah Athletic Department. And on today's show, we're going to be talking about what we saw from Utah against Weber State, kind of breaking down the game, not really talking about what it means for Utah, just that they beat Weber State, but more so looking at how the individual players performed in that and to see kind of how they're going to do now that they're starting the gauntlet that's going to be 2023 Pac-12 play. The Pac-12 is loaded, 8 ranked teams, and that's not changing with all of them not notching wins. Colorado nearly suffered a loss, but all those teams notching wins, and it's going to be just a great final season for Utah in the Pac-12, and it's going to be really fun because they're going to be tested a lot. So we're going to talk about the defense. At the very end, we're going to talk about some opponent observations. It's a fun new segment I'm excited to start. But first, I want to talk about the offense because that is kind of the biggest thing we were all excited to see in the first game was how would Nate Johnson do? And I thought Nate Johnson did pretty good. I thought he did. Let's look at his numbers, right? I mean, what did he do in terms of what his numbers were? 13 for 21, 193 yards and a touchdown. And that's, of course, not including his legs, 16 carries for 71 yards and a touchdown. So, yeah, I thought Nate was really good. I said I would like to see Nate throw for 200 plus yards in this one. He had 190. That's barely off it. And we know he got even more than that with his legs, like we know he's capable of too. So I thought Nate looked really good. I said going into this game that I still thought that Utah, we'll talk about Cam Rising's availability another day. I believe the reports were there was by Josh Newman, I think put it out. There was optimism around his potential return this coming week. I said before, though, I still think Utah can win over the Bruins without him. And I'm still going to pick him to win without him. And the odds also say that as well as the sportsbooks odds have come out, and Utah is favored against UCLA without him. And one of the reasons those odds didn't change was how Nate Johnson looked in this game, right? I thought he showed pretty good accuracy overall, good job escaping the pocket at a couple times too. And we know what an incredible athlete he is, right? Like he is, when the offensive line does their job and blocks for him, he can make the one guy miss. He can take, and it's nice as well when you can get like Jalen Glover on an outside run one time. He was able to like be an extra blocker for him. That's just nice when it's Nate Johnson one-on-one with a safety or whatever, because he is so elusive, fast, quick feet. Like he can make those guys miss, which is a huge asset to this Utah program. And I think that even when Cam comes back, I think we'll continue to see Nate on the field because of how devastating he is with his legs overall. So we know what a great athlete Nate is. It's good to see him continue to grow as a passer too. I thought he made a number of really good and accurate throws. I thought he should have had even more yards. There was one pass early on in the game he threw over to Money Parks, and it ended up incomplete. The DB had Money Parks' other hand. Like that, it should have been a flag, and if he doesn't hold him, it's a perfect pass to Money Parks. There was another one where I wasn't sure if on one of his touchdown passes to the end zone, I wasn't sure if Landon King just lost it in the sun or what happened. At least from my angle on the TV, it looked like Landon King might have had a chance to dive and get it. So that's another one where maybe if it works out differently, and I don't put that on Landon. It was one, maybe it was thrown too far out, maybe just lost it in the sun, but just missed opportunities, of course, always. Now with that, I will say as well, Nate probably should have had a pick six, right? He threw it and it bounced off the Weber State guy's hands, off his fingertips. Like would have been a nice catch by the Weber State defensive back, or linebacker, hence why he wasn't able to make it, but still probably should have been an interception. At that time he locks on to Reed still, but for being a redshirt freshman starting his first ever game, I thought he looked really good in this one. As I mentioned, pretty good accuracy overall. And I'm excited to see the future of Nate Johnson because I think when Cam's gone, based on what we've seen in these couple games now, I think he's the favorite to start next year. And I know I said that last year too, and originally Brandon Rose had beat him out in spring ball. We'll see what Brandon looks like in game. But we also heard before Brandon got hurt that Bryson was gaining ground on him. And we know what's happened with Bryson recently. So really loved what I saw from Nate overall. I thought he was really good. And I'm just excited to continue to see his growth and evolution as a quarterback because I think he's already a really good quarterback. And I think he's only going to continue to get better as it pertains to him being a passer. And he was a really good passer on Saturday too. So moving on from that, skill position players, we'll hit those quickly. Running backs, Jalen Glover, Jaquan Jackson. They're awesome. They were awesome in this game. I don't think we need to talk about them more than that because they were just really good. And there's other things like the running back position is probably what I feel the best about right now as it pertains to this Utah football program. If there's holes there or just one guy's like you need to make miss, Jalen Glover and Jaquin Jackson can both do that. Now, Jaquin Jackson did get a little nicked up in this game, so we'll see what his availability is like against UCLA. We've heard Kyle Whittingham talk about how many injuries this team is currently dealing with. So it's one of those things that makes it challenging, but you got guys like Chris Curry who are starting to come back in the fold and get going too. So I still feel good about the Utah running back room. The receivers, how awesome was it Mikey Matthews, that big screenplay he had? Just such an elusive wide out guy who can just really scare defensive backs because he is just that quickness he has. And we know he was so big for Utah against Baylor. And this week, it was fun to see him get it done in the screen game. That is not the last time the Utah's going to be throwing a screen pass to Mikey Matthews. And of course, when you just talk about the pass catchers and just pass catchers, how good was Munir McClain in this game? I mean, 4 for 92, I believe, is what it ended up at. He's a guy that's going to just continue to need to see time. I think even when all the other players like the Devon Vele, like the Micah Pittman are healthy again, is you need to continue to put Munir McClain on the field because he is a good route runner. He's a good athlete, explosive, and got good hands. We saw the connection him and Nate had in this one, and I think him and Cam could hiccup a couple times this year too. Money Parks continues to be involved in this offense. As I mentioned, if the DB doesn't hold his hand, he should have had another deep completion and had other stuff over the middle of the field. And he's just continues to grow as a route runner. Love what I've seen from Money. Tight ends, I still think Yasmin needs to be involved a little bit more. As I've said, we know how much Cam loves his tight ends. I expect that to change. It was cool to see Landon King out there almost make a couple of grabs. And then Mickey Sukaturaga is still a work in progress to me. There were a couple times again where I felt like this is always hard. I'm not in the room, so I don't know exactly what his assignment is in terms of like exactly 1000% it's his fault. But just from having watched a lot of football, having played football and been coached up, especially like on how blocking works along an offensive line, where I played that my entire high school career. And based on just, like I said, what I know about football, having evaluated, watch film and all that stuff, a lot of Utah's misses on running plays, it just looks like some of those are on Mickey. Not all of them, but multiple ones. Just each game, Mickey has a little bit of a lapse because he is a defensive end converted to tight end. It's going to take time to get him up to that high level. And that happened again in this game too. So Mickey just needs to continue to be a work in progress. And I think it might be a little bit of an issue for this Utah team just throughout the season is they don't have a Logan Kendall level blocking tight end this year. Mickey's good. And when there's someone straight in front of him, that's where he excels. But when it's out in space, whether he's pulling or just in general, like kind of on a stretch run, getting to the outside, and he's got to locate someone, that's where a lot of times he'll take on someone else when he should have taken on the closer guy to him who's got a better shot at the ball. That's at least how it looks on film to me. So still like Mickey, though, I think he's just a work in progress. And last but not least, the offensive line, really good run blocking. I mean, Utah rushed for, what was it again? 231 yards in this game. When the Utah offensive line was clicking, it was a thing of beauty. Overall, the pass protection was pretty good, I would say. And even the run blocking, right? There were a couple lapses in the run blocking. You get a linebacker, a miscommunication. That's just going to happen through the course of a game, right? Like mistakes happen. The offensive line overall was really good. I did have one concern after watching the game. The left side of the offensive line needs to do a better job of picking up twists and what a twist is for. I mean, a lot of you guys do know. Some of you don't know. Either way, that's fine. But what a twist is the defensive tackle and the defensive end. The defensive end will kind of crash into the guard, basically. Like, obviously, defensive end's lined up on the offensive tackle. He'll kind of crash into the guard, or he'll loop around one of the defensive end or defensive tackles. They'll loop around each other. And basically, more times than not, it's on the guard and tackle to pass that off. Keaton Bills and Spencer Fano struggled with that a couple times in this. And Spencer Fano is just another one that you just continue to need to chip and kind of help him out. He's still just growing as a left tackle, still got run over a couple times, gave up a couple sacks and pressures in this one, but he's a true freshman. I just think that as you get against the best pass rusher in the Pac-12, you're just going to continue to need to give him a little bit of help, whether that's a running back chip, a tight end chip, but he's coming along, and especially in run blocking, I thought the offensive line and just the pass protection overall was pretty good. I thought there were just a couple times like a blitz got in or things like that, but I am feeling good about the state of this Utah offense right now. And as I mentioned, I still think Utah's going to win if Cam doesn't play, because we're going to get an update on Cam's availability from Coach tomorrow, Coach Whittingham at his press conference. We may even hear from Cam at media availability. So interesting things to keep on. But overall, do I wish the offense would have been more dominant throughout the game, like every single time scored? Yeah. But even just watching the game through, it's just like there were like fluke things of like, oh, just like this little one thing happened. That's just going to happen throughout a game, like a missed pass or little small things. So overall, feeling good about the state of this Utah offense. And I'm feeling even better about the state of the Utah defense. We are going to be talking about them in one moment. But first, today's episode of Locked On Utes is brought to you by Betterhelp. Do you ever find that you're just trying to fall asleep and your brain suddenly won't stop talking? Do your thoughts start racing right before bed at other inappropriate moments? It turns out one great way to make those racing thoughts go away and to talk them is to talk them through. And that's what therapy gives you a place to do. So you can get out of your negative thought cycles and find some mental and emotional peace. You make sure you guys can head over to BetterHelp, and BetterHelp's a great resource for you guys to give a try. If you're thinking of starting therapy, give BetterHelp a try. It's entirely online, designed to be convenient, flexible, and suited to your schedule. Just fill out a brief questionnaire to get matched with licensed therapists and switch therapists anytime for no additional charge. Get a break from your thoughts with BetterHelp. Also, I want to talk to you guys about one of the sponsors of today's episode in UCCU. Learn and Earn, the UCCU mobile banking app that pays your entire family to learn about money. Kids look to parents to become more financially literate. Parents don't always know the answers. Learn and Earn breaks down financial topics into fun, bite-sized educational games like quizzes and trivia. Every time a family member completes a topic, they can earn points that can occur and can be redeemed for gift cards to stores like Amazon, Apple, Sephora, Walmart, Nike, and so much more. There is age-appropriate content for every member of the family who can compete against each other and track their progress on leaderboards. Learn and Earn is inside the UCCU mobile banking app, so play it anytime, anywhere. The more you play, the more you learn, and the more you learn, the more you earn. Learn and Earn, part of UCCU's award-winning Be Money Smart Youth Banking Program, helping kids, teens, and parents have fun while becoming more financially literate together. UCCU, love where you bank. Alrighty, coming back into this one, let's talk about the Utah defense. The defense was really good. Some of the numbers for Weber State, they only had 66 yards passing, only 61 yards rushing. They scored one early touchdown in the game, and outside of that, they were shut down. The Utah defense was its dominant self. And on that one run, look, that was just one where credit the Weber State offensive line, which has a lot of former, like there's BYU guys along that, just has former high-level Division I offensive linemen along it. They executed that play well. I thought Lander Barton and I think it was Leavani Dumuni both kind of took poor angles and just reads. They came down too fast into the outside, opening up that gap, and boom, you got the one big run. They scored on that touchdown. And outside of that, the Utah defensive execution was really good. I said the one play, and then overall, I thought they played great. Spencer Fano, was great seeing him have the strip sack in the game. He's just so speedy and athletic off the edge. I think he's a huge boost and just bolster to this pass rush in general. Lander Barton's pick six was awesome. What is it, 21 or 20 consecutive seasons with a pick six now? Either way, it's an FBS. I think it's a record, like just in general, not just for the Utah program, of course, but like I think for college football maybe. And so crazy stuff. And in some ways you could be like, oh, it's weird that no other program's ever had one, but it just speaks to the talent that Utah's always had defensively, that they're able to register a pick six, whether it was Clark Phillips last year, RJ Hubert had one last year, and guys like Lander Barton who just do a good job making reads when quarterbacks make a mistake, which is what happened on that play. And Lander Barton did a good job, saw it all the way through, and got the pick six there for Utah. Other things just for that stood out for me for the Utah defense. Keanu Tadavasa just continues to look really good. He's a guy I'm really high on. Him and the rest of the Utah defense had a little bit of a rough first quarter against Baylor, but outside of that, like every other half, I think they've been exceptional. And even when they struggled a little bit against Baylor, like they were still good overall. They were just giving up a little bit of yards there. They're still one of the best defenses in college football so far. And Tadavasa is a big part of that for Sevilla, not just to plug up the run, but create a little bit of pressure as well from the interior because of that athleticism he has. It's great to see Cornelius Reed back in this one. Leavani Dumuni continues to be really good for Utah since transferring in. I thought the secondary was also sensational. Anytime you limit a passer to his under 70 yards, like, are you kidding me? That's unreal. I thought so many times we were dropped back. There was just no one open. And we know what Sione Vaki does with the special plays he's always able to make. And he had a thunderous hit one time on the Weber State running game. And Cole Bishop laid the wood on the Wildcats quarterback even. So this Utah defense, Morgan Scalley has this group dialed in. I know that not everyone's back and healthy, and hopefully some of those guys are back and healthy by the time they play UCLA. I'm hoping like these 2 kind of weeks off from the Baylor game on, and just for the guys who haven't played yet this season, we're coming up on about a month since the season started. I'm hoping this will be the coming weekend where those guys will get and have their opportunity to shine, and they'll be healthy and everything and good to go, and that this Utah defense will be ready, because the Bruins do present a little bit of a test for this Utah team. I still think Utah's going to win because I think, true freshman Dante Moore, just not as many special playmakers. And that's a UCLA team that hasn't really been tested a little bit. I think they had a close call with Coastal Carolina in the first game of the season, but playing in Rice-Eccles Stadium is a wholly different animal. So I just really like the advantage that the Utah defense is going to have this week. But one thing that does make me a little bit nervous, of course, is this special teams were a big issue for Utah in this one. The kickoff coverage, I think Coach Witt's quote was poor or whatever it was, but yeah, whatever not good superlative you want to use to describe Utah's kickoff coverage applies in this one. And I think that's one where, because it hadn't really been an issue. I don't remember it being an issue outside of that in other games this season. Maybe once or twice on a punt or something happened, but overall, that's like the normal thing, right? Like this was multiple kickoffs. This was the first game where it was kind of alarming. Like, hey, you guys need to get this figured out because you can't give a big kickoff big kickoffs to some of these opposing teams. And Weber State's weirdly always been good at kickoffs. We talked about it last week, how Rashid Shaheed took that one to the house a couple of years ago. So that is one thing I don't want to put too much against like this Utah team, where like the Weber State is really good at that. And but still, Utah should have executed better there. I think they'll be more disciplined, stay in their lanes. I think they'll do a better job coaching up. I'm not really worried about the kickoff coverage. I thought that was just kind of a one-time off thing. I think they'll maybe make a couple personnel changes. This team's got such good athletes at every position that I feel like you'll find guys who will execute at that level, stay in there, have lane discipline, be able to make those tackles in space. The one thing that I was glad Utah got out of their system is what I'm hoping for, is just the freak, kind of the bad snap they had and then the bad hold that led to the backup kicker who was in for Utah having to throw a pass. That was definitely something we do not want to have happen again on a field goal. You cannot, against Pac-12 teams that are as good as the Pac-12 is this year, you can't avoid those just really rough plays on special teams. So that's something that, hopefully Cole Becker will be back here shortly, and the snaps are down and good. The hold is good. And you can kind of move from there, because that was a train wreck. Watch it. That snap just had to be picked up and you try to throw it. That just can't happen going forward. And it hasn't happened before. That was the anomaly. I think that Utah will coach everyone up and be good there too. Jack Bomeister continues to be a strong punter for this team. Once Cole Becker's back, we know what a good leg he's got. And I think he's going to be back for the UCLA game. I don't remember hearing anything otherwise. You guys can correct me in the comments. So overall, I'm feeling good about the Utah special teams. If they were going to have issues on special teams, like just over the course of the season, if you said Utah special teams are really going to struggle in one game, which one would you want it to be? I would say the Weber State, because they can overcome that one. That's where I'm hoping this was a little bit of a wake-up call for the team, and Coach Shaw and everyone's just going to really dial in on special teams and make sure that is, and there'll be a point of emphasis this week, because you can't give up plays in the kicking game. It's just when the other sides of the ball are going to be so back and forth throughout Pac-12 play, you can't afford to have multiple returns or just miss kicks and things like that. Just inexcusable, can't happen. And I don't think it will happen for this Utah team. So I expect them to be dialed in, and I expect this defense just to be dialed in, as I mentioned, against the Bruins. And I'm going to be breaking down a little bit what UCLA likes to do on tomorrow's show. And we'll talk about that, as well as some of Coach's quotes. But before we get out of here, I do want to talk about some of the observations I had, particularly from the Colorado game and even another game. It's a new segment we're going to be doing called Opponent Observations, and just talking about how some of Utah's future opponents, and even in this case, one of the past opponents, just kind of makes Utah look in general. Of course, talking about Florida, who had the win of last week of college football by beating Tennessee at home. We're going to break all that down in one moment. But first, I want to talk to you guys about our friends at Athletic Brewing. Now is the time for your game changer of the week, brought to you by Athletic Brewing Company. Much like I'm going to go with Nate Johnson because of what he did against Weber State with both his legs and arms. Let me know in the comments who your guys' game changer of the week is. Athletic Brewing has completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. They make non-alcoholic beers that actually taste really good. Athletic Brewing Company, they've completely changed the non-alcoholic beer game. Their brews are great tasting and award-winning, and they beat out full-strength beers in global competitions. They brew over 50 style of craft non-alcoholic beers, including IPAs, golden sours, and more. They're constantly releasing limited edition experiment styles to add to their variety. They're fit for all times, so you can drink them anytime, anywhere, and make any activity more enjoyable, like watching the big game, going to your kids' games, even just working out, even doing stuff at work in general. There's no hangovers ever. So you can find Athletic in store, online, and bars around the country. You can find Athletic Brewing Co.'s non-alcoholic brews at a store near you, or buy online at athleticbrewing.com. First-time customers can use code LOCKEDON, that's all caps, no spaces, to get 50% off your first online order. That's code LOCKEDON at checkout. 15% off at athleticbrewing.com. Near beer. Exclusions and conditions apply. Athletic Brewing Company, fit for all times. Alrighty, last thing I want to hit on before we get out of here is talk about some opponent observations. This is a new segment I'm going to be doing each Monday edition of our show, and talking about what I saw from either teams that Utah is going to be playing or that they've played in the past, because at the end of the season, when college football resumes and all that stuff is being factored in for rankings, the totality of your schedule is looked in. So the past opponents do weigh in on this. But first, I do want to start with a future opponent and talk about Colorado a little bit. Obviously, they had a wild game against Colorado State. I mean, one of the craziest games, arguably maybe the craziest game of the season so far, with everything played out in the Buffs double overtime win over the Rams in that one. And just watching Colorado, I'm very impressed with Shedeur Sanders and his abilities. And anytime this team is in a shootout, I think they're going to have a chance to win because of how special he is. And the skill position players are really good for this team. Dylan Edwards is a very good running back. I think the receivers are potent, and we hope Travis Hunter gets back and healthy soon. Really hated that cheap shot and everything that played out there. But I still really like Utah against Colorado. And the public likes Oregon a lot against them. I think Oregon favored by like 17. Colorado is not great in the trenches. Their offensive line has struggled to protect Shador throughout the season, and their defense is meh too. Whether it's their corners and getting beat at times, their front seven can get pushed around in the running game. We saw TCU that one back for TCU average like 7 or like even 11 yards a carry. I can't remember now off the top of my head, but this is still a very good Colorado team. I think they do deserve to be ranked in. I think they will end up being a top 25 team. Maybe they won't be, but I just think a loss for them is definitely going to come against Utah, because I think Utah's a very bad matchup for Colorado based on what I've seen, because of how strong they are in the trenches. And I think they're going to be able to get after Shador. And once again, just to beat Utah, I feel like you got to be really strong in the trenches. And this Colorado team is not that. So that was something I noticed, but I'm very curious to watch Colorado take on Oregon this coming Saturday. That'll be the first real test for me for the Buffs, because Nebraska and TCU, they're just not very good this season. We kind of know that now after watching college football a little bit. And especially this didn't perform well in week one, because of course, a lot of people overreacted to a week one performance by the Florida Gators. And everyone was like, fire Bill and Napier, this Florida Gators team sucks, yada, 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 yada. And now they went in and beat Tennessee. And what's so funny to me about Florida beating Tennessee is, number one, how often do we talk about on this show how hard it is to win on the road? I just feel like people constantly forget that in college football. I said leading up to the game, I said a lot of things that were right and wrong leading up to the game about predictions. When you're talking about a game for 6 months, you're throwing a lot of darts and a lot of opinions out there. You're going to hit some because you throw that many, and you're also going to have a lot of misses. I definitely had misses on the Florida game too, but obviously Utah did win, so I got that part of it correct. But everyone was talking about how, the Florida offense got all these freshmen, all this talent, all this, all this, that. And I was always like, yes, they do have that much talent. That doesn't always click in the first game. In fact, I said I thought Florida's worst performance of the season is probably going to come in the first game. A good Utah program with a lot of starters back in it. And you have a lot of new pieces, injuries along the offensive line, like new offensive line coming together in the loud and ruckus Rice-Eccles Stadium. That's how it played out. So it's a very good win that Florida beat Tennessee. Am I surprised? I'm surprised, but not like falling over my chair, because I watched Florida. I'm like, oh, Graham Mertz will get more comfortable. Their offensive line will come together. They have backs like Etienne and Johnson. They're decent. So that was a really good win for Florida, and it makes Utah beating Florida look that much better. But once again, just don't forget how hard it is to win on the road in college football. And I think that really got forgotten by Florida fans, and Utah fans don't forget either. Remember this Utah team in their biggest road games last year, not in their neutral site games. We saw what they did against USC, and then how they were hanging in against Penn State until the Cam Rising injury, at Oregon, at Florida last year, and then at UCLA. Those were Utah's probably their 3 worst performances of the season. Utah defense was really good at Oregon, but the offense, even that was against a hampered Bo Nix, and we saw Cam struggle too. So play one of his worst games. Just don't forget how hard it is to win on the road in college football, but a great win for Florida that makes Utah look that much better. So that's going to do it for my opponent observations. I'd love to hear from you guys, whether it's, we didn't get to see USC this past week, but and just watching Oregon and some of the other teams throughout college football. What were some of your opponent observations, whether past and future, that Utah is going to be playing? Let me know in the comments below. That is going to do it for today's edition of Locked On Utes. Come back tomorrow once again, breaking down a little bit of the Bruins, as well as reacting to the comments made by Coach Whittingham in his press conference. We'll see you then. Have a great Monday.